Hello, my name is Libby Tyler, and I am the Ethics Director for the Northern Section of the California chapter. And I would like to just kick off this webinar. It's our 2021 ethics program. And what you'll be seeing first is an introduction by Professor Emeritus Robert Olshansky, who will be talking about the concept of ethics in general for AICP members as well as other planners. Next, we'll move into a recording of a live program that we had in April of 2021. And this is led by Darcy Kremen, AICP, who is with Rincon Consultants and has put together a terrific program, starting out with an introduction and then a quiz show of sorts. So you may not be able to participate in the quiz show live, but you can still guess your answers and keep score on how you do. And then we'll be moving into a scenario discussion with breakout groups. And for this recording, we'll have actually 2 sets of breakout groups, and there's about 6 different scenarios that we'll be discussing. And then finally, the entire earlier recorded session will come back together for discussion as a larger group. And this will cover the 90 minutes of required ethics training. Also in the program, you'll see the CM credits code that you can use. So if you're watching this webinar after the fact, you are still eligible for those credits, and we'll be providing you with that code that you can go right into your CM and log those credits. So enjoy, and I know that I continue to learn more about ethics each time I participate in one of these webinars, and I hope that you learn and enjoy the discussion here. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Rob Olshansky, and I'd like to introduce us to some basic ideas of the role of ethics in APA and AICP. So I'm going to start with the question of why are we doing this? Why are we here? Some of you may be wondering that. Why is professional ethics of such central importance that we have? This is one of the things that's required in our continuing education, that we all have to have some kind of refresher in ethics every 2 years. So the idea is that planning is a profession. And when people hire us, they're hiring us as professionals. They expect that we represent some general principles and higher values that are higher than just our own personal interests. The idea is that we represent standards of a larger profession rather than just ourselves. So what they expect is they expect ethical standards of behavior, and they expect a certain level of professional competence and professional judgment. So these are broadly represented first by APA's ethical principles, which are on this note. These are APA's ethical principles. This is not AICP. This is in general for APA, adopted in 1980 by APA, revised in 1992. And you can see the URL here on the slide. So you can see these for yourself. What I have here is just a summary. And broadly speaking, these are that we serve the public interest, that we maintain high standards of integrity and proficiency, and that we improve planning competence. So again, these are general principles for all APA members. And the way I look at this is I think the key concept here is trust. That people, the public, clients, all the different stakeholders in any planning matter, that they need to know that they can trust us. Again, trust us, not just that we're going to be selfish individuals, but they can trust us to act in the public interest, to act with integrity, and to act at the highest current standards of practice. Move on, trying to get the next slide. There it is. So now we'll move on to the AICP code. So the AICP code, in contrast to APA's ethical principles, it has an enforcement procedure for those minimal principles that were in the APA principles. So there's an enforcement procedure, so they're required, and you can have consequences if you violate them. And secondly, there's the aspirational standards that require what they call conscious striving to attain. So these are things that we're always trying to get better at. So in order, they're actually in reverse order here. Part one are these aspirational principles. And these are grouped into three general categories. The first one is our overall responsibility to the public, which would include things like rights of others, equity, broad stakeholder involvement, paying attention to long-range consequences and interrelatedness of decisions, to protect integrity of the natural and built environment, and so on. The second one is our responsibility to our clients and employees, and it means that we strive to apply independent judgment and also to avoid conflicts of interest. And the third area is our responsibility to our profession and our colleagues. And this one is general principles of professional practice, which I note includes contributing time to help others and to advance the profession. So we're all in this session for, you're not getting paid for this, but we're all contributing time to advance the profession. And those of us who are presenting are contributing time to help others. And this is something that all of us continually aspire to do. So they're just very concisely summarized here. I just very briefly summarize them. I commend you to read them. Again, you can find them, that you see the URL at the top of the slide there, planning.org/ethics/ethics code. You can find them there. And again, I want to remind you that the basic idea is that these reflect the trust that clients, the public, employees, and colleagues should have in our actions. So part two, or part B rather, are the rules of conduct, and these are the things that are enforceable. They're the laws, and through which we can bring enforceable complaints. We can bring these complaints to the ethics officer, complaints against other AICP members, and there's a process by which those are adjudicated. In this, there are 26 rules to which we are held accountable, and we can be sanctioned for violating any of these 26 rules. So these are 26 very specific things that we shall not do. And again, I'm not going to go over them, but you should remind yourself and look at the code. And one I am going to bring to your attention, I like number 25, which I view as sort of the catch-all. And it says, "We shall neither deliberately nor with reckless indifference commit any wrongful act, whether or not specified in the rules of conduct, that reflects adversely on our professional fitness." So yeah, so we're agreeing to, regardless of all of those very specific things, that we will not commit any wrongful act, whether or not it's in those rules, that reflects adversely on our fitness to serve in our profession. Now, the other three in E, the advisory opinions, the complaints of misconduct, and discipline of members, these are the administrative rules, and they describe how all of this works. You should read them. It tells you how you can bring complaints. It tells you what the consequences are for violating, and so on. And also know that if you have any questions at all, that you can contact the ethics officer, who is currently Jim Peters. And again, all this information is very easily accessible on the APA website. Let's see, we'll move on to the next slide here. So what actually happens out there? It's always helpful for us to see what ethics issues are raised each year that come from actual practice. And so here, this is a summary of what came in front of the ethics committee. There were just in calendar year 2020, this was, there were 19 cases resolved. Of them, and this doesn't add up to me either, it looks like 18 to me, but in any case, I'll read what's on the slide. This came from APA. There 8 cases were dismissed. And generally the topics these covered were failure to notify affected parties, illegal discrimination, inappropriate comments at a virtual public meeting. That's certainly a 2021 for you. Providing inaccurate information, and sexual harassment, which was filed against a non-AICP member. 5 cases were dismissed after formal charges were filed, so they went through some bit of a process, and these involved gaining a special advantage, inappropriate public contract procurement, non-disclosure of secondary employment, and providing inaccurate information. And 5 cases were settled. There was a 1-year suspension of AICP certification for derogatory comments on social media and an email, 2 separate complaints, and misuse of AICP certification. So again, it's very instructive for us to see these. We get an idea of which topics are ones that come up, or at least came up in 2020, and in terms of what kinds of consequences there are. And so we see that there was 1-year suspension of AICP certification, and that if you make derogatory comments on social media and in emails, or misusing AICP certification, that this can happen to you. And 3 cases are still pending as of the end of, I guess, 2020, which was plagiarism, misrepresentation of professional statements, misuse of the AICP credential by a non-member. And I don't know how they get disciplined, because sort of one of the most strongest disciplines here is disciplinary actions is loss of your AICP credential, either temporarily or for life. Next slide. So they also had informal advisories. So this is people calling up the ethics officer with questions. They could just be information, they could be advice, they could be things that occurred that they're wondering whether they should do anything about. And again, it's instructive to look at these. At least it reflects things in 2020, but it gives you, for one, what I see here is that, sometimes you think, well, we have, all these different ethical categories, and probably 1 or 2 of them is where, all the stuff happens. But no, that's not really, this covers the broad range. Anyway, the biggest category in 2020, at least for concerns, advice, etc., was legal and ethical conduct. The second big one was honest and fair dealing. Conflicts of interest is a big one, and I that doesn't surprise me. Quality of practice was a large one. We have false or deceptive statements. There was loyalty to employer. 19 of them on respect for confidentiality, private communications, and the lower end of the scale, but still quite a number of cases and calls on abuse of position, misuse of credential, and lack of cooperation. And finally, where did all of these occur? So, this map is interesting to look at. For one, they occur not every state, but most states had, at least a case or a call, some ethical issue in 2020. The large ones, 18 in California, 16 in Florida, 7 in Texas, they seem to occur. Obviously, they occur where the planners are. And otherwise, I don't think there's too much you can read into this. Obviously, California is the far and away the biggest in terms of population and number of planners. Personally, I found it a little curious that the Northeast there, New York and Pennsylvania, didn't have as many. But again, this doesn't really mean anything. It's just a general indicator that there were a variety of these complaints on a variety of topics all over the country, and they could happen to you. With that, I think that that completes my introduction, and thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. While you're waiting, here is something you can do, which is open up an internet browser, go to myquiz.org, enter that code at the very top of the screen, enter your name or nickname. You don't need an email. We're going to be playing a trivia game in just a few minutes, but we'll have this information again, but if you have a little time and you want to get that started, you are welcome to. With that, we have a lot of people in, I assume. I do want to get started on time. Are we recording now?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Welcome to the AICP Ethics Training Webinar. I'm Darcy Kremen. I'm the Director of Environmental Planning at Rincon Consultants. I will be leading you through this ethical training today, and if you want your hour and a half of CM credit, you need to stay to the bitter end. It's not ethical to drop off unless you're having internet problems, and you can watch the webinar later and catch up. But we're really excited to host this today for all of our AICP folks. We're looking at the Code of Ethics. You probably haven't looked at it in a while. Maybe once every 2 years you might pull it out and dust it off, but today we're going to be doing that. Libby, do you want to say a few words before we move on?
Yes, welcome everybody. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we were going to have this session in person just a little over a year ago, and I'll let you guess why that didn't happen. But Darcy has been gracious enough to bring it back to us in a virtual format. We've had great numbers of registrants, and we'll also be recording it for anybody else to view, anyone you know who still needs their ethics credits, and you're just under the wire for the grace period for this this period, and certainly it would be available for next period. We're planning another joint legal and ethics session for later this summer in the fall, so stay tuned, and we're hoping once again to provide that to you in person, hopefully, as well as virtually. So thanks very much, and it's been my pleasure to serve as your ethics director for the Northern Section.
Thanks, Libby. So I will just briefly tell you how today's going to work, and then we can move on. We're going to start with a brief introduction, remind you about the Code of Ethics. We're going to be doing a trivia contest. The link is in the chat, but I will also have it up on the screen, so you will need to open up an internet browser to play, and hopefully we'll all get a lot of participants. We will then break into breakout rooms, and you will be put in a breakout room with a facilitator. Your facilitator has been assigned, and you will that person will lead you through some ethical scenarios. You are all expected to participate. Please mute your phone if you are not muted. And you know, we do appreciate you being here. This is part of your AICP certification. And then we'll come back together at the end. We'll discuss some of the things, lessons learned, and things that we've spoken about in our groups. And we have some disclaimers we need to tell you, and then we will end at 1:30 sharp. So here we go. First, I wanted to thank all of the facilitators with us today. We had a great enrollment, so we needed facilitators, a lot of facilitators. We have this great group of people. And of course, Libby's with us, the Northern Section Ethics Director. So why do we talk about ethics? Well, it's to raise your awareness. We do need to keep those Code of Ethics knowledgeable, keep them in the front of our brain if possible. Most of the time it's to protect the public interest. I think the planning code is one of the best codes out there. It really is thinking ahead. It's thinking about the public. It's not just keeping us safe. And it's also about public expectations. So really important items. As you may remember, the code is divided into 5 sections. Section A, the principles of which we aspire. Section B, our rules of conduct. Section 3, advisory opinions. Section D, adjudication of complaints and misconduct. And Section E is discipline of members, which was a new section added at the last update. In 2020, the Ethics Committee was hard at work, and they received a lot of advice, opinions. They issued 21 they had formal advisories for 21 cases. 19 were resolved and 3 are still pending. This, at the end of every year, the Ethics Committee does put out their breakout of the year. Here's all the cases we heard, and you can see what they were dismissed for and what's still pending. Last year also, they received 130 requests for informal advice. And it's, again, all of these topics. The most prevalent is the legal and ethical conduct, and all kinds of topics in between. This is everything that was heard in 2020 by the Ethics Committee. And a breakout by region, and our region heard 19 cases, that's region 6, 18 in California, 1 in Nevada, but you can see we're pretty well distributed across the country with ethical questions for the committee. Pretty much it's kind of similar to the population breakout of the country. So that's a very brief overview so you can remember what the ethics code is all about and some of the cases that were heard. And now it's time to try to get into our game. So again, open up an internet browser. You will need to go to myquiz.org. At the very top, you will see enter code to join the quiz. Up here, you'll enter 699190. Enter your name or nickname, doesn't matter as long as you know who you are. No email is required, and get ready to play. There are no prizes for the top, but bragging rights that you know the code of ethics that well that you can do the trivia. You will also be graded on not only having a right answer, but having it faster than other people. So it's timing and it's correctness. So while you're doing that, I'm going to switch screens to the quiz. Hang on a sec. That's not the one. Here we go. All right. Hopefully everyone's in or getting in. Here's our code. And we've got 52 people getting in there of our 250 we can host. It's a lot. Oh, good. Look at those numbers rising. If you're not able to do this, just play along. I want you to be thinking about these answers as you go. Ah, nice. I like it. So I'm going to start it in just 1 minute. Oh, nice. Climbing. All right. So you're going to see the same questions on your screen, and you will need to respond. What are the top 3 issues raised related to the inquiries and misconduct cases in 2020? We've got abusive position, honest and fair dealing, conflicts of interest, and legal and ethical conflicts, excuse me. And time's up. A lot of good responses. It was everything but abusive positions that came in the top 3. So, good job, everyone. How many sections are there in the AICP Code of Ethics? And I just said this, so hopefully you know. Is it 5? Is it 3? Is it 7? Or there are no sections? It's not really divided up that way. Everyone's fast on the draw on this one. Nice. You are correct. It is 5. Good number of people knew that because I just said it. Who determines if a hearing is to be held to review what discipline will be imposed on a member? A, it is the sole discretion of the ethics officer. B, your employer. C, the APA executive board. Or D, at the request of the member. And the correct answer is it is the sole discretion of the ethics officer. Only person who gets to make that choice. What do you need to do if you are convicted of a serious crime? A, immediately notify the ethics officer by certified and regular first-class mail. B, immediately notify your employer. C, immediately notify your spouse. Or D, no need to do anything APA related. And the correct answer is yes, you need to immediately notify the ethics officer, and they want 2 forms of notification. That's how the code is written. Failure to achieve the code of aspirational principles cannot be the subject of a misconduct charge or cause for disciplinary action. True or false? Failure to achieve the aspirational principles cannot be the subject. And the answer is true. Those are things to which we aspire, but it's not one of the things that you can be charged for. What are you required to do if charged with ethical misconduct? A, sign a confession. B, cooperate with the ethics officer and provide information requested. C, inform your employer, or D, nothing. It is cooperate with the ethics officer and provide the information requested. Great job. Right now, Emily is in first place. She must be fast on the trigger. Who is the ethics officer? Is it Joel Albizo? Is it Mitchell Silver? Is it Jonathan Chapman? Or is it James Peters? This might be a trick question. It used to be very easy, and now it's a little bit more difficult to know who the ethics officer is. And the answer is James Peters. He is our ethics officer. If you feel that an advisory opinion is incorrect or incomplete, you may request reconsideration of the ethics officer, the ethics committee, Carol Barrett, or your mama. That is, oh, yes, the ethics officer is the correct answer, not the ethics committee. And Kendra has taken the lead, so I got some shifts in leaders here. True or false? Once a formal advisory opinion is requested, the ethics committee must issue an advisory opinion. True or false? The answer is false. They do not have to issue an advisory opinion. If one is issued, it will be issued within 90 days of receiving all necessary information. All these little hidden pieces of the code that you probably haven't looked at in a while. The ethics officer must do which of the following, and more than one answer may apply. A, negotiate a settlement. B, hold a hearing. C, notify and consult with the ethics committee prior to potential settlement. Or D, impose discipline if there has been an ethics violation. More than one answer may apply. Only the last two. The ethics officer does not need to negotiate a settlement or hold a hearing, but he or she may consult and must consult with the ethics committee and must impose discipline if there has been an ethics violation. To what do we aspire? More than one answer may apply. Our overall responsibility to the public, our responsibility to our clients and employers, our responsibility to our profession and colleagues, our responsibility to equity and the environment. Ooh, a little slower on this one. With the top three, we the current writing of the code do not have a responsibility to equity in the environment, but I have a feeling that might change in our new update. We must provide timely, adequate, clear, and accurate information on planning issues to A, our employers, B, NIMBYs, 3, all affected members of the public and governmental decision makers, or D, various stakeholder groups. And the correct answer is C. That is our obligation to provide members of the public and governmental decision makers with good information. We should contribute time and resources to the professional development of A, disadvantaged communities, B, students, interns, and beginning planners, C, our employers, D, the general public. And the answer is students, interns, and beginning planners. Most of you guys knew that. Danae's up. How many informal advisory requests were reviewed by the Ethics Committee in 2020? I went through this pretty fast, but maybe people were paying attention. Maybe not. Every year it is different. And the answer is 130. There were a lot in 2020. Confidential admonition letter, a public censure letter, suspension or revocation of AICP are A, confidential, B, drafted by the APA Council, C, potential forms of discipline, or D, circulated for public review and comment. That's right, they are potential forms of discipline. You guys know that one. How many total misconduct cases did the Ethics Committee review in 2020? Different number than the informal advisory opinions that they had. Formal misconduct cases. That's right, 21. True or false? Does our responsibility include educating the public about planning issues and their relevance to our everyday lives? The answer is true. That is part of our ethical obligation. If convicted of a serious crime, membership of a certified planner shall be revoked. When can it be reinstated? With payment of a penalty, if the conviction is overturned, upon completing public service, or obtaining an advanced degree. That's right, only if the conviction is overturned. You will not get your AICP reinstated unless that happens. When was the last revision to the AICP Code of Ethics? Was it 2016, 2010? They have not been revised since their adoption, or 2005? And the correct answer is 2016. However, a new code of ethics is supposed to be adopted in 2021, which will give you more stuff to learn next time, is what I wrote. It has been, the draft is being reviewed. We have not seen it yet, but we hope to see it soon. So we'll see what the changes are this time. Which of the following conditions must occur to file a complaint? More than one answer may apply. A, the complaint must be made by a certified planner. The complaint must be against a certified planner. The complaint must cite the relevant provisions of the code of ethics that has been violated, or the complaint must explain how the code of ethics has been violated. And it's all three except the top one. It does not have to be made by a certified planner, but the other three conditions do need to apply. It does need to be made against a certified planner, and you need to cite the code and how it's been violated. What is the greatest consequence of failing to adhere to the rules of conduct? A, loss of certification. B, jail time. C, having to take the AICP exam again. And D, it goes on your permanent record. I know which one I don't want. That's right, loss of certification. No one said taking the AICP exam again. How many ethics cases or calls were received by the ethics committee in our electoral region in 2020, California and Nevada combined? 16, 18, 19, or 25? That's right, it was 19 because we combined the 18 from California with the 1 from Nevada. Just a few more questions. See how you do, Danae, still in first place. If your certification was revoked, you may petition the ethics committee for reinstatement in 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. When can you get reinstatement of your certification? Five years is correct. Last question, true or false? In a formal advisory opinion, the ethics committee must use the names of the parties involved in the opinion. This is a formal advisory opinion. It's false. They do not have to include the information of the parties without consent or include it at all. Awesome. Well, it looks like Danae, you get the bragging rights. I'm pretty sure that was the last question. Look at that leaderboard. Do you have the same screen I have? It's hard to know. Everyone's, I know to get to hear anyone. So we have a gold. Kendra came in silver, and Abe got the bronze. Good job, everyone. I'm really happy everyone participated. That was pretty cool. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. Make sure we're on the right slide. Are we seeing my screen again? And we'll go to scenarios. Right, so now Ben is going to break us up into various rooms. You'll have your facilitator. You will go through some scenarios. We expect participation from everyone. You got to earn that credit. And we'll look for some lively discussions when we come back into the main group at 1:20. So we have some time. Take your time discussing these scenarios. Definitely, we want to hear from everyone.
Welcome. We are now in the breakout session for the AICP ethics training brought to you by the California chapter and the Northern section. And my name is Libby Tyler, and I'm the Ethics Director for the Northern Section. And would you please introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Rob Olshansky. I'm an emeritus professor of urban planning from the University of Illinois, but I live in California.
Very good. And we're just going to start with a smaller breakout for the first few scenarios that we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And start our show of the scenarios. Okay, you see this all right then?
Yes.
Okay, so we've left the game show platform, and we're going to talk through a few scenarios and see what we think. So let's start with the first scenario. You are the community development director, and a developer calls you and wants to talk to you privately about a challenge they are having with their application. You have the ability to make a binding decision to waive a specific standard, and they want to share with you the merits of the case. They don't want you to make the decision, but they hope you can simply have a cup of coffee and hear them out on the challenge and the solution they have in mind. Can you accept the meeting? What do you think, Rob?
Well, I certainly, I'm always paying attention to the code of ethics, which of course we all have completely memorized. But in addition to that, I always, to me, the most important thing is it always talks about the appearance of a conflict of interest. And sometimes things just won't look right to an outsider. And I'd have to say having this kind of a private meeting, if somebody were to find out about it, it doesn't, it makes me uncomfortable. I suppose you can, some way you could mitigate that is, well, for one, you could offer the same service, the same opportunity as rather to all the stakeholders in this decision, or you can make it clear that you can make this not a private meeting. So you can make it out in public. You can invite somebody else to come along. You can make it more transparent and known that you're having it. But I would be very careful. My inclination would be to not.
Yeah, I think that this case does depend. I mean, in the public sector, you might often be in a position where you need to make administrative decisions. They don't all go to discretionary review. They might go to planning commission, but many smaller decisions might rest right with the staff. So what occurs to me, you do need a way to provide a venue for sharing of information. But in this case, I would definitely want to have a witness. I think that that's most important thing is to have a setting where you can have a witness, and then to be careful about how you would respond, because of course any decision can be appealed, and needs to be rendered fairly, and there needs to be due process. And if you're just having a private meeting with no rule set or whatever, that can be exploited by either side, actually. So and then, of course, there's, like you said, the appearance of a conflict. What if you say you're having the coffee and, somebody comes in who happens to live really close to that site, and maybe they're not so happy about the decision, and what is that going to look like? To them, they might just look like you're cooking up a deal, right? Type of thing. So let's see what Darcy says. Well, she says it depends on our rules of conduct. And did you have something else you wanted to offer there, Rob?
Well, I was going to say just this whole cup of coffee thing. So, one question would be, so why not just meet in your office? And I mean, it's true, the going out for the cup of coffee. I mean, on the one hand, that's actually, it is more public in a way, but you're right. Somebody's likely to see it, and that's when it might cause some trouble. So why not just have the meeting in your office with other staff members in the
Yep.
office? So it's open, but it doesn't send any problematic messages out there. Anyway,
Yeah, that's a
kind of-
great point. Absolutely. So it's not just who you're meeting with, but where. And again, it's the appearance. And so from our rules of conduct, we shall, number 8, we shall not as public officials or employees engage in private communications with planning process participants if the discussions relate to a matter over which we have authority to make a binding final determination if such private communications are prohibited by law or by agency rules, procedures, or custom. And it is a good time to remind everyone that we are bound by AICP ethics, but also by our workplace rules and many state ethics laws as well. And violation of these can have serious consequences depending on the circumstances. And then further, there's an implicit suggestion here on our principles to which we aspire, which are kind of the overarching goals that we have, which is the overall responsibility to the public. Our first principle, we shall deal fairly with all participants in the planning process. Those of us who are public officials or employees shall also deal even-handedly with all planning process participants. So like we said, there can be opponents, there could be interested parties. We need to have an above board process where everybody can have a say. Okay, so let's move on now to our second scenario. Scenario 2, you are a certified planner working as a consultant for a school district for several years. And the district asks you to comment on a controversial city EIR on its behalf, the district's behalf, right? The project involves multifamily housing, which will bring a lot of children to the district schools. Your consulting firm worked on the EIR, although you did not work on it. You yourself did not work on it. Is it permissible? Can you draft a comment letter on behalf of the school district? What do you think, Rob?
Well, again, I end up falling back on the sort of the common sense rules here, and this. It looks awkward. It feels awkward. It is awkward. And you could talk yourself into a pretzel figuring out how you could get away with doing this and justify it to yourself, but it feels really uncomfortable to me. So on that basis, so yeah, maybe, as I said, maybe you could reason your way to, yes, you could draft the comment letter, but it just feels really uncomfortable. For one, well, so I'm assuming you would be doing this, it would be on the city's letterhead, I guess. Although, I mean, you're working as a consultant. So okay, if it's on your letterhead, if it's on your consulting firm letterhead, then that's going to be a problem. But I guess, but I don't see, you can't really do it on the city's letterhead either. I guess you could provide information to the city so that they could make a comment. But even that, if somebody heard about it, it just feels awkward. It doesn't matter that you didn't work on the EIR. You're close to it. And, we talk about one way there's a conflict of interest is when there's sort of personal, I forget the term, but basically money involved that you could personally benefit. And your fate, your financial fate is tied to that of your firm. And so this makes it awkward if the comments are saying, this EIR was inadequate, the consultant did a lousy job on it. It just, there's all kinds of levels of conflict. So I say, don't.
Yeah, I agree. I think it stinks. This is jumping back. Let me get this to advance here. Okay. Yeah, it definitely stinks. And there's actually, if you think about it, there's 3 parties involved here. There's the city, the school district, and the consulting firm. So you can't really be taking digs at your employer, if you will. So there's a kind of another layer of conflict of interest there as well. So I think that that's a task for the school district that you cannot engage in. It needs to be have any credibility to avoid any real or perceived conflict of interest. It's really going to have to be prepared by an independent person, maybe a second consulting firm would be proper. So just in terms of the principles, our overall responsibility to the public, we need to give people the opportunity to have a meaningful impact on the development of plans and programs that may affect them. Participation should be broad enough to include those who lack formal organization or influence. Our responsibility to our clients and employers. So anyway, what are people going to think? You know, if you're working for the same firm that you're criticizing there, and is it, you know, really representing the school district's view? Overall responsibility to our clients and employers. We shall avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest in accepting assignments from clients or employers. This is a good one to pass on. And finally, overall responsibility to our profession and colleagues. We shall describe and comment on the work and views of other professionals in a fair and professional manner. How are you going to do that if it's your very own firm that writes you your paycheck? Okay, let's go on to our third scenario. And here we go. You are a public sector planner working with a consultant firm in your community on a major development project that has been highly contentious, and involves significant community outreach, including a community advisory board that you've been working with very closely since the project started. After several months, just as the plan will be presented to the advisory committee for final input, and based on the excellent quality of your work, the head of the firm offers you a position within the firm. Are there ethical considerations that would prevent you from accepting this position? What do you think? Are you going to go for it, Rob?
To answer the question there at the bottom of the slide, yes, there are. So, you know, it's unclear from this scenario, you know, whether this is like a sort of a planning firm or really sort of like the developer's consultant. It doesn't really matter, but I'm reading this as developer's consultant, which sort of raises it even another level. And again, just imagine you're a member of the community in this contentious process, and you're suspicious of all kinds of things. And you know, and it turns out, you know, and say you're on the advisory committee and you've been working in good faith, and suddenly the public sector planner who's in charge of this suddenly switches sides. It to me, it undermines the credibility of the entire process. So absolutely not. Now, I suppose you could, well, you could go to work I don't know what the right amount of time is, but you could go to work for this firm after this whole process is done. Would be okay. Even that might look a little funny, actually, to the public and to other members of our profession. And so I would even be careful of doing that, and I would make sure that I did it in just the right kind of way. But that's the only way you could do this. But you certainly wouldn't go to work for them now, or want anybody to know that you actually just getting this offer at this point is extremely suspicious and might undermine your ability to even go to work for them later.
Yeah,
it sort of smacks of a quid pro quo, you know. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, I think what you're suggesting is like a revolving door provision. So, you know, whether it's a year or whatever, that's, you know, maybe enough time to get some separation. But yeah, jumping ship from one side to the other, that's, you know, that's more than just tacky. I think it does, you know, raise questions about credibility of the whole process, as well as you as an individual, your ethics and integrity. So it's certainly wouldn't be as tempting as it might be. Say they made a great offer to you, it certainly would not pass that ethical test.
Yeah.
But let's see what Darcy
Okay.
said
And
for
also,
this one.
I
Yeah,
think
go
you
ahead.
I just say you made a good point there. It actually reflects badly on everybody. It reflects badly on you. It reflects badly on the city. It reflects badly on people's trust in the profession.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like the developer's kind of trying to buy you off a little bit there too. So it's
Yeah.
muddying the waters, if nothing else.
Right.
Okay, so the rules of conduct, we shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than our public employer any compensation, commission, rebate, or other advantage, and may be perceived as related to our public office or employment. So maybe people might perceive, this person was just auditioning, this planner was just auditioning for this plum job, right, with the developer, and that's not going to look good. Number 8, this one I don't see quite as directly, but we shall not, as public officials or employees, engage in private communications with planning process participations if the discussions relate to a matter over which we have authority to make a binding final determination, if such private communications are prohibited by law or by agency rules, procedures, or custom. So maybe there's a thought here that there was some type of private communication that could have been problematic as well. And then looking up to our principles as well, and again, number 1, our primary obligations to serve the public interest, and we therefore owe our allegiance to a conscientiously attained concept of the public interest that is formulated through continuous and open debate. We shall achieve high standards of professional integrity, proficiency, and knowledge. To comply with our obligation to the public, we aspire to the following principles. We shall deal fairly with all participants in the planning process. Those of us who are public officials or employees shall also deal even-handedly with all planning process participants. So this would seem to interfere with that process and certainly with the perception of a fair process. I think we would now go on to the 4th scenario, but we're going to go ahead and join a larger breakout group now. So we'll get to hear from other individuals. But I've enjoyed speaking with you, Rob, through these first 3 scenarios, and we'll jump to another breakout room to look at the next 3. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, Phil and Larry. All right. Phil is studying for his AICP exam. So he is a rising planner, an emerging planner, okay? We all remember that. And we feel an obligation to them. And he's been asking Larry for pointers on ethics. Larry, though, is a longstanding AICP member who always looks forward to the exciting ethics training sessions at APA conferences. Super exciting, right? And Phil, that's a quote junior planner, who's working at the public counter of a small city. Sounds like where I work. And he asked Larry about a situation in which a frequent customer, Diane, suggested that Phil join her for a weekend at her cabin. She insisted that Phil's going to pay for the gas, but she's going to cook the dinner, and then they're going to go on a lake hike. Sounds like fun, right?
Sounds like a date.
No, he thought it seemed, remember, he's just studying for exam. He's not AICP. He thought it seemed harmless enough, but Larry cautioned him about any perception of conflict. So if Phil wants to turn to an official AICP source, well, actually, I might ask a first question. Do you think, is there any problem for Phil to go on this date, number 1? Number 2, if Phil wants to turn to an official AICP source, what are his options? And what are Larry's options as an AICP member if they have a bit of disagreement about ethics? Okay, so they might disagree about it. And what is the role of the ethics committee to issue a formal advisory? So let's take these by turn. So the one I added was, is this okay for Phil to go on this date? What do you guys think?
No.
Probably not.
Okay, how come? Sounds like so much fun.
I know it does. It sounds great. But if Phil is in a position where he is able to issue permits or render some sort of a decision to Diane, then I think there's a perception of conflict there, and I'd be concerned about that.
Okay, yeah, because we can assume that Diane is an applicant, I think, coming
Yeah.
up the counter.
Right.
And of course, the bad ones are always named Diane, but setting that aside, I think there's also a gift involved here because there's some value to a stay at her cabin. I mean, if he wasn't going with as her guest, he'd be paying, I would assume, to stay at a cabin. So, I mean, I think it's wrong on a number of levels, and I just would not do it.
Yeah. Is a perception type of thing. Say there's Sally is also an applicant, and she sees that Phil and Diane are just so close. And oh my gosh, they cut us off by 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Here we've been taking a leisurely stroll through it all.
Right when we're getting to the good stuff about Diane and Phil, darn.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, you know, there could be the perception of Sally, you know, is she getting put first in line for her application? So I think you're right. There's something in addition, but let's talk about the formal process. So what are Phil's options, do you think, if he wants to get an opinion on this? What do you think?
Well, couldn't he go and talk to his, you know, the section ethics director about the dilemma and get some advice or guidance, even though he's not AICP yet, but is striving to become AICP certified?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think you can, because there's actually, if you notice on the website, there's a phone number to call Jim Peters. I know him because I used to work in Illinois. He's a great guy. So yeah, I mean, even though Phil is not yet AICP, he can get some advice. And I think Larry could as well on his behalf.
Right.
But, you know, I think that the ethics officer, it's not a formal complaint, so it's advisory. And I think that's a good role for the ethics officer. And so then the second question, does the ethics committee have to issue a formal advisory? What do you think?
I'm not sure, but I would lean towards unless, because nothing has really happened yet, that they don't need to issue a formal advisory unless they're requested to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's true. It's not a formal inquiry, if you will. So here's some information on the advisory opinions, and you can seek the informal advice from the ethics officer, and that's for anybody. And that's like a free thing. And then 3A, you can seek a formal opinion from the ethics committee. And this would be from not Phil, but Larry, because he's the AICP member. And gosh, I don't know if I were Phil, how I'd feel about that. And 3C, the ethics committee will not issue an advisory opinion if it determines a request concerns past conduct. May also decline to issue an advisory opinion for any. So remember, the date hasn't happened. So it seems like it's a little premature.
Mm-hmm.
But
Now we're calling it a date.
But gosh, this is a sticky wicket, and it does make it harder, not just AICP, but other ethical obligations for those workplace romances that really are very commonplace, or at least used to be. So we're probably not going to be able to get through scenario 5, but let's just look at it anyway. You're a planner for a city planning department. You have an old friend who runs a planning consulting firm in the same city. Your friend submits a competitive proposal to work as a consultant for your department to you on Friday. And while you're in your office, he or she asks you to be her guest for dinner at a very fancy restaurant on Saturday evening. What might you do if you actually might have some influence in awarding the contract? What do you guys think?
Don't go.
No, 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 no.
RSVP, no.
Yeah, I would say if you're in the position to make a decision on it and you have friends submitting proposals, you should get yourself out of that position.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not just that, you know, you don't go to the dinner. I think that you don't review that particular, you find someone else on the staff who doesn't have that conflict, because again, it's that perception. So I agree with you. I would decline the role. Anyone else? What do you think? Is
Who is
that
that?
Allison?
Yep. I said, yeah, don't even be on the selection committee. That's what I agree with you.
Okay, cool.
I agree.
All right.
How do you do this? Like, because I end up making really good relationships with all the clients, you work together in thick and thin. And then ultimately if that client is re-releasing an RFP, like
I think it's a difference
you
between,
don't meet them at like
yeah,
networking.
a collegial relationship, which is great to have, versus that kind of that personal friend.
Mhm.
And if people know that you're friends and hang together, it's that perception. So it's
Mhm.
not an actual conflict. I mean, it's not like you have, you're living in the same house and sharing expenses and that type of thing. It's a perceived. So if they know you're buddy, and it's nuanced for sure. I used to work in a smaller city, and one of our planners was very good friends with a developer, and that was tricky. So our economic developer was very good friends with the developer because they went to school together, et cetera. So I think that once you make these decisions, if he was in a position to choose and competitively, then I think he would need to step away or recuse himself. Well, let's take just a
Got
peek
it.
at the last one. Anyone else? Sorry. Okay, I think this is the last one. So I guess we will be able to get through this. This is what Darcy calls a box of chocolates. It's the holiday season again. You're a consultant and you have many clients you'd like to send gifts and cards to as a nice thank you. For one city you work for all the time, you personally bring a big box of chocolates to the planning director and her staff. Is giving the chocolates to them an ethical violation? Number two, are they allowed to take the chocolates under the code of ethics? So there's two questions here. Is it okay to give? Is it okay to take? What do you guys think? Surely you've had this happen to you.
We do it every year.
You eat chocolate every year, okay?
Well,
How do you handle it, Laurel?
Well, we do it fairly, I think. I mean, first of all, we give it to every jurisdiction we work with. We recognize the hard work of the public sector, employees. They work so hard, and oftentimes I think that they are not provided with the same level of, just you're doing a great job that we get on the private consulting side. So we, as a firm, do this every year. We also are very cognizant of, sort of a monetary threshold. I mean, we just bring in, breakfast items and coffee for all the employees there on an annual basis, and with every jurisdiction we work within. And, I think most jurisdictions have the gift acceptance policy in place, or a threshold. Right. We're not giving it to one person, we're giving it to everyone there in the department. And so that's how we handle it.
Yeah, I think that's the way I've seen it. And we're going to get bounced out, but I guess the difference between the box of chocolates, you can share it and you disclose it. From the public side, you disclose it, you can share it.
Right.
If you're given box seats to a game, that's a little different.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been great.
Yay. We're going to slowly start getting everyone in back from the breakout room, but we're going to have some discussions. It sounds like everyone went pretty fast, but that's good. If we went through all of the scenarios, it's fine with me. I'm looking forward to hearing what insight people had. And I'm going to pick on my facilitators to jump in. Do I have a facilitator who wants to start talking about some of the insights, some of the interesting things that came out in your breakout room?
Did you want a general impression, or did you want specific summaries on how we talked about one of the other scenarios?
Let's do some general impressions, and then
Well, we had a
anything
mix of public agency people and private sector, and I thought our discussion was excellent. We had a really great group. We jumped in and got interested in all the topics. We had some super good ideas, like creative ideas about how to mitigate a perception of conflict and things like that. We actually didn't finish early. We were still in the middle of number 4 or 5, I think, so that's our general. It was a good discussion.
Excellent. So what's the, how do you mitigate conflicts of interest? What was the consensus? Was there a consensus?
Well, I wish that folks from the group could speak up, but I don't know if they want to. But for example, on number one was a good one. That was the one,
I'll go back to it.
the private meeting. So
yeah.
So private, yes. Secret, no. Not if you are a hearing officer, but okay for the director. But don't make it secret. Put it on your calendar. Bring someone along if you can, and make a memo to the file as to how the meeting went, and buy your own coffee, and maybe things like that. Others don't. So maybe things like that could make it a yes and not a knee-jerk no. Some thoughts.
Very interesting. Awesome. Another facilitator want to tell us how the room went, if you had any interesting insights?
Hi,
yeah,
Daphne.
go ahead, Florentina.
Hello. I actually wanted to call on Vivian if she doesn't mind speaking up about this particular scenario, because we had a discussion about, what's the difference in between this request and any applicant or developer just simply calling the city planning manager or the community development director and saying, like, I don't agree with what your staff is saying. This is what I want, or, this is why this project is amazing. And Vivian had some really great nuance in there. And Vivian, do you want to speak up, or do you want me to summarize your nuance?
I'll jump in.
Awesome.
I think for me, one of the critical points in the description is that the director has the ability to make a binding decision. If the director's decision was not binding, then I'd say it's fine to have to go ahead and have a meeting. You could have a cup of coffee in the office, or but it should be listed. You should take notes. You should record it in, as others have suggested. But if you can make the binding decision, that means that's the final decision. And what I suggested is what you should be saying to the applicant is, if you have something important to say, it needs to be in the administrative record. So here's the appropriate time and place for you to do that.
Thanks, Vivian. That's great. Other thoughts from your group, Florentina? You want me to pick on someone else? I'll pick on someone else.
Oh, well, we wanted to applaud scenario 5. We got really wrapped up in it and felt kind of like a Lifetime movie. And we decided the scenario 5 is really like the movie preview, but we all want to see where Phil and Diane end up in the end.
Oh, that's 4.
Oh, is that 4? Sorry.
Yeah, Phil and Diane.
Oh, yeah, Phil and Diane. So, we had a lot of questions like, who is Diane? Is she just delivering paperwork, or is she actually the developer? Is Phil married? Is Diane married? Or is this a date?
That's quite quite intriguing. Yes.
But we definitely dove very deep into this scenario, and we wanted to fully appreciate it for what it is, an amazing Lifetime movie.
It's coming to Netflix in the fall, so be on the lookout, because Shonda Rhimes is going to produce it.
Oh, I'll have to send in my tape for the audition.
All right, I'm going to pick on someone else, but thanks, Florentina, and thanks for facilitating that room. First and next, I want to mention Carol Barrett is here, which I didn't realize you had signed up, so I'm very honored you'd come to my ethics training. And you were an answer to one of the questions, wrongly, but I would have chosen to pick Carol as my my first call out of jail for you. You got to hit your mute button, Carol. Can you tell us what's happening with the Code of Ethics? I know they're updating it. There's a draft out, right?
Yes. I'm on the committee that identified possible changes to the Code of Ethics. And we got involved in multiple tasks, not only what is missing from the Code of Ethics, but what's there that is problematic. And then right now we have an introductory statement to the AICP Code of Ethics. And we also have a statement of ethical principles that applies to all participants in the planning process. And one of our charges was to unify that document rather than saying, oh, okay, if you're a citizen planner, this is what you look at. If you're a professional planner, this is what you look at. And we finished our work and sent it to the commission about 6 months ago. The commission has a lot of new members, and I think they looked at it and they said, oh, thank you so much for this. And then over time, they've gotten interested in it, they've gotten engaged in it, and we just got comments back from the commission, I guess about a week and a half ago. And so the question is now, how do you go big on it? And what's the best way to engage the larger community? There have been times when the code has been revised after input at the chapter level. There have been times when the code has been revised at a commission meeting with very little input. And then there's everything in between where something is published in Planning Magazine and they respond to those comments. I'm hoping that this is going to be a go big effort, because the rewrite appropriately looks at what are issues of justice and equity. And instead of saying, oh, well, that's an aspirational principle, there's a lot of effort to say, as you do your planning, this is the way those concepts can be given meat on the bone. So I'm feeling really optimistic about it at this point.
That's great. I personally pay attention to the Code of Ethics because of this training, and I look forward to the changes that are coming. I look forward to seeing a draft or just having a brand new, updated Code of Ethics. So I was like, it's coming. I thought it was coming out in 2020 because I'd been following for a while, and then I saw something that looked like it was pushed back. So I'm so glad you're here to give us an update on where that is, because we will need to read it very carefully when it comes out. I hope everybody takes the time to read it. So let me go to a couple more facilitators, and then we'll wrap things up. I'm going to pick on Libby. How was your group, Libby?
We had a great group, a small group, and we had people from the private side, primarily, and some public planners. And I would say pretty much on all of these scenarios, we talked about conflict of interest and perceived conflict of interest, because it seemed to be applicable to all of the scenarios. And we even took an even more conservative view in some of those scenarios. So I think we had a pretty cautious group. We also, like Florentina's group, we spent a lot of time trying to piece out Larry and Phil and Diane, and one of our members was named Diane, so that was interesting. But I think that we did have a very good discussion, and we also spent time talking about these different layers of ethical obligations we have, not just with the AICP code, but also workplace rules, especially in public, but also private. There's state rules as well, and California certainly has ethical obligations for government employees. And then I even brought up a situation I remembered from HUD, some federal rules. We talked about revolving door. And one of the scenarios, that revolving door, and that was an opportunity to remind ourselves that there are some positions where they'll impose a 12-month, sometimes even longer revolving door. And with HUD, even though you might be working on the same side for affordable housing, I think they have that 12-month revolving door, and violation of that can be very serious. So it was a great discussion, and I don't know if anybody else in our little group wants to mention anything else I might have forgotten. Raise your hand.
I just have like a general observation from the whole AICP program, that it is very public sector oriented. And a lot of times, like private consultants like myself, especially in early career, are left without many answers, especially if you're wanting to be community serving. So that's just general, like, as we're thinking of updates and other things, like even the exam was it's very public sector. And I feel like there are equal people both on private and public side. So
that's a great point. And I will tell you, since CM came in and we started doing ethics training, my panel and I that usually do it are half private and half public. And the private sector folks have always struggled with how this applies to us. And then crafting scenarios. So if you got to scenario 6, which is the box of chocolate scenario, we reverse that to make it private sector focused, because it's always been about, you're the planning director, can you accept the box of chocolates? And that didn't speak to me or my other private sector fellows. So I agree. When you read the code, it's written as if you are a public sector employee. It is not written as if you are a planner in any private sector job. It's a great point.
And I agree. And there is some effort to address that. I would say that some of the consultants working in this area, as members of the team, really strongly rejected that notion. They wanted the freedom to decide what makes sense for their firm, and never felt that there should be across the board injunctions. The public sector is more comfortable with that. So we struggled with that. That's an excellent point, and it's been, it will be better, but not as good as it might be.
Interesting. Thanks, Carol. Is there any other facilitator? I'm gonna pick on someone if I don't hear from anyone who wants to jump in.
I'll talk.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I believe we were group 11, but I might be getting my number wrong.
Doesn't matter.
Very great discussion. We had good time kind of getting through all the scenarios. I would say in general, we were mostly concerned of seeing issues, but had really good options for what I would call mitigating or avoiding the potential conflict or the perception of conflict. I did want to just bring up a larger, maybe to the larger group, and I'll call on Randy, who was in our group. In scenario 3, we had the situation, which is where the job offer was made by the private applicant, I believe, to the public sector employee. Randy brought up a really good point in our discussion about state law actually having some issues with that, and then the need for, even if that person does not accept that position or never, there is a perceived conflict of now that person may be biased and continuing to see that. So if you have anything additional to share, or we just wanted to bring that to the larger group, because that was an interesting thought, which is, well, if you're in that public position, do you now have a responsibility to remove that person who was in essence being pitched to leave? So and I don't know if anybody else has knowledge of California state law regarding and how to act. Does anybody have any thoughts? That was an interesting thought that we had in our group.
Good point.
It doesn't seem, if they weren't a party to that, it was unsolicited, then I think that they'd still be in pretty good shape. But something like that, public sector, I would alert your supervisor and confer with the city municipal attorney, your corporate attorney as well, because you certainly don't want a violation. And again, the perception, if the word's gone out that you've got this offer, yeah, you could be in a tough position even if you didn't ask for it.
Totally. I think what we talked about was if that public sector planner who got the offer, well, whether they want it or not, they might be flattered to the point where all of a sudden their viewpoint of the applicant and that project may be changed. They're compromised in some way in going through the rest of that process. So again, I think being conservative in that sense, it's definitely something to think about. I think I totally agree, Libby. Communicating that with your supervisor and you know the head of the planning department and possibly your city attorney is a good first step, just to make sure that you've got all your I's dotted and T's crossed and make sure there's no perception of conflict or actual conflict in that case.
Great, thanks, Matt. If anyone else has any other thoughts, I'm gonna move on to our end. Here we go. Oh, any questions or thoughts? Because I did have this slide in here. Any questions on the scenarios? Any questions on the code of ethics? The trivia, some of it was really in the weeds and some of it not so much. Hopefully you know some of it by heart. Yes, Libby.
I had another comment on, and Carol didn't mention this, but hopefully we'll see more of an emphasis on equity in the code of ethics. And currently you can, if we do diversity, equity, inclusion training, you can get ethics credits for that. And that is going to be a new category of CM for equity training. So that's coming up. I'm not sure exactly when this year that's going to be happening. Carol might know, but it'll be another way, you know, to get your training. And I think that's very appropriate.
Yeah, it's great. I think my understanding is in the beginning of 2022, so January next year, all of our CM requirements change. So rather than an hour and a half of ethics, we only have to do an hour, but we do have to do an hour of equity and inclusion and an hour of sustainability. Is that the other one, if anyone remembers? Because
yes, that's true.
Thank you, Ashton. Yes.
Sustainability as well.
So we'll only have to do an hour of this fun time next time. But I think it's great. All right, I have to tell you the fine print. So this comes straight from the AICP Ethics Committee. Please note, this session has been created to provide general education regarding the AICP Code of Ethics. Through problems, example problems and questions and answer sessions are an important part of illustrating application of the code's provisions. All certified planners should be aware that only the ethics officer, James Peters, FAICP, is authorized to give formal advice on the propriety of a planner's proposed conduct. So you have to go to James Peters if you want a formal advice. If you have any specific question regarding a situation arising in your practice, you are encouraged to seek the opinion of the ethics officer. We're just here to train you. We're not here to give you an opinion. But the real reason you're here, of course, is to get your CM. This is so you know how to do this. And someone needs to help me put this code in the chat log so it doesn't get lost. But you'll go to your planning.org website, log in. You'll enter event code 9214358. Add to my code log. You'll fill out the survey and be ethical about it. Make sure you're staying for the full hour and a half. Hit enter. You're done with your ethics training for 2 years or one. I don't know how it's going to work as we switch to the next year with one hour. Maybe you'll have an extra half an hour going forward. And we wanted to give a big shout out to both the APA California Northern section who hosted this, as well as the state section, APA California. And of course, Florentina's here, our section director from Northern section. A big shout out to Ben Morrison, who's been helping us behind the scenes with all the breakouts and getting us back in, and all of our amazing facilitators. There were 12 people helping me with all these breakout rooms because there were 13 breakout rooms because we had room for 150 signups for this. So we wanted to make sure we had enough facilitators, and I couldn't have done it without all my facilitators. I hope that you were entertained as well as educated, and that you'll go back and read the Code of Ethics as it's written today. And then when we get the new draft from Carol's committee, we can all sit down and read it together and enjoy the new changes and give our feedback if they'll allow us to give some feedback on that.
Geez, one would hope.
I'm looking forward to it. Any other thoughts? If you need to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. But again, anyone, go to your ethics officer if you have an ethics question. If you want more training, you can ask me. but I won't give you any formal advice.
Thanks, Darcy.
Thank you all. I appreciate you guys being here.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.